everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Caitlin, and on this channel I upload all sorts of content relating to true crime, education and psychology related topics. So if that sounds like something you'd enjoy, then definitely check out all my other uploads and give it a subscribe if you want to keep up with my regular upcoming videos. I also do have a second channel, a TikTok and an Instagram where I regularly update, so they'll all be on the screen and in the description so you know where to look. And welcome back to day 2 of my week of true crime uploads. So every day this week, Sunday to Sunday, I am uploading a different true crime case, all relating to different things. So I hope you're looking forward to all of the content this week. Today's case, we're going to be discussing that of the disappearance of a young boy called Ricky Thomas Jr. This is a very mysterious one, and from what I can gather, it's a slightly lesser known one, but it definitely does cause a little bit of controversy in terms of people's beliefs in what could have happened to him, and you'll see sort of why. There's a lot of strong opinions on this, so I'd love for, as always, you guys to leave your thoughts down below in the comments, but please do be respectful as always to other people's opinions, because obviously everyone's is valid. This is unsolved for a reason because we don't know exactly what happened. Before we get started, I'm just going to zoom through my usual disclaimer that I like to include at the start of all my videos, just letting you guys know that I'm not claiming to be an expert in this case or any of the other cases that I cover over on my channel. I'm simply relaying the information I'm able to find myself through research of certain sources on the internet, and because only certain sources are accessible to me, it means I may get things wrong, leave things out or mispronounce things, and I do apologise if I do any of those things. I'm not trying to cause anyone any harm or injustice. I'm simply working with the information I have available to me. So with all that being said, we should just go ahead and get started discussing the disappearance of Ricky Thomas Jr. Ricky Thomas Jr. was born on the 21st of December in the year of 1983, meaning that he would be turning 38 years old this year. Ricky and his family lived in a house in Bristow in Indiana, and his stepfather, a man named John Martin, had been the last person in his family to see him before his disappearance. John had seen 13-year-old Ricky inside the family home at around 11:30 a.m. on November the 6th in the year of 1997. After this encounter with his stepfather, it was known that Ricky had rung up his cousin named Daisy Applegate somewhere between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. that afternoon. Ricky and Daisy had previously made plans to go on a trip together to a place called Tell City in Indiana that same afternoon, and he'd called up that afternoon to make sure that they were, good to go. He was confirming that they were still to go ahead with their plans to travel. He'd also specifically told Daisy that he wanted to go to a specific McDonald's in Tell City, and he told her that he had $20 for them to spend on them both when they made it there. During the phone call, he had told his cousin that he was going to walk to her home so that they could then go ahead on their planned trip. And her home was located around a mile to a mile and a half away from his own house, so he'd planned to stay at his cousin's house that night when they'd arrived back from Tell City, and it was only a short walk for him to travel to before they'd started their trip. The last known sighting of Ricky had been whilst he was walking along Oak Ridge Road in Bristow area not long after this phone call with his cousin, but it's known that he never made it to Daisy's house. Ricky was around 5'8" to 5'9" tall, with sandy blonde to light brown hair and green eyes. He had very small scars on each of his cheeks, and he was known to be wearing long denim shorts and a black hooded sweatshirt with Route 66 written on the front when he'd left his home that day. Later that evening, when Daisy still hadn't heard anything from Ricky after expecting him to have arrived at her home hours before, she decided to ring Ricky's home. When she did so, Ricky's mother, a woman named Tina Martin, had answered the phone call. She informed her and his stepfather that she was ringing to check on Ricky as he'd never made it to her home when he was supposed to, so they couldn't go on their trip that day. They had been concerned initially, although they waited until the following day to contact the police reporting him as a missing person, as they wanted to see if he did return home later that same night with some reasonable explanation for where he'd been. When Ricky's family had contacted the authorities, they had informed them that the day before, when he did leave the house, he had taken 2 backpacks with him. But interestingly, authorities had discovered when they'd carried out a search of the family home that the $20 that he had told his cousin he was taking with him to spend on them both when they'd made it to McDonald's in Tell City, it had actually been left inside his wallet, which was on top of his dresser inside his room, meaning that he hadn't left the house with his wallet that day. All of his other personal belongings had also been inside his room, giving them the impression that he may not have planned on being away from his house for a long period of time. But one thing of interest to note is that the family had two 13-week-old puppies in their home, but they too were nowhere to be found. Ricky's family had told the authorities that they didn't believe it was likely at all that Ricky would have taken the two young puppies with him to his cousin's house that day, and so this seemed like a very, very unusual detail in the case. You know, if he had chosen to take these puppies, why would he have done so since they were so young? But again, his family stressed that it was very unlikely that he would have. Ricky's mother and stepfather continually told authorities that they really didn't believe he would have likely run away from home, as this is often a popular theory in missing teenager cases for authorities to follow. It is known that Ricky had in the past experienced quite a few behavioural problems while he was in school, so he was often disciplined. And then, not long before his disappearance, he was actually expelled from his school for outwardly threatening some of his teachers. As a result of this, he was then to be homeschooled by his mother and stepfather, but it just so happened that on the day of his disappearance, both of his parents were working. There was not a lot of information known regarding the authorities' investigation into Ricky's mother and stepfather initially concerning the disappearance. It's known that they were very early on taken in for a polygraph test relating to the case, but I couldn't really find a lot of indication as to what these results were. Ricky's stepfather, John Martin, at some point in the investigation was actually listed as a possible suspect in relation to the boy's disappearance, and I think a lot of the suspicion relating to the boy's stepfather comes from behavioural problems. It's known that Ricky in recent years had spent a lot of time at his cousin's house, sometimes staying there for months at a time, when his parents were said to have been particularly struggling with his behaviour, but ultimately there has yet to be any arrests in the case. One fact that appears to raise more suspicion of John, so Ricky's stepfather, in a lot of people's eyes, had been something that occurred not long after Ricky's disappearance. One day, Tina, Ricky's mother, had received a phone call from an unknown caller at her home. The caller had instructed Tina to go to a specific remote location where she would find some proof of Ricky being alive. She'd followed the caller's instruction and travelled to this remote spot where she discovered a snow globe that had actually belonged to her son. This finding had seemingly given her this glimmer of hope for her son's safety, but not long after this occurring, John, her husband, had actually admitted to planting the globe in this spot. He admitted to Tina that he had been the one to place the phone call to her reporting that she would find this in this area, and that he had actively disguised his voice so that she wouldn't recognise him over the phone. It's also known that John didn't have any physical participation in the search for Ricky following his disappearance, which a lot of people believe is an extremely unusual behaviour for someone who is a parent or a guardian of a missing child. According to one source I read, the day after Ricky's disappearance, he had told his employer that he was going to take the day off work to go and visit his sister, but it's known that he didn't actually do this. It isn't known exactly what he did, but it's known that he didn't go and visit his sister on this day, which again a lot of people believe is rather unusual. Authorities had also allegedly received a confidential tip that just before Ricky's disappearance, John Martin had travelled to Ferdinand in Indiana with the intention of inquiring about the insurance policies that each of his family members had. I couldn't find a lot to confirm this, but obviously this had come from an alleged confidential tip, so there wouldn't be any knowledge of who exactly had known this piece of information. Ricky's cousin Daisy had shared her belief that Ricky had left by choice and that he would simply return to his parents when he was older. She didn't have any knowledge of Ricky's whereabouts or his intentions, but simply informed the authorities that she knew Ricky particularly well, and she believed that he was likely to have done this because of all of the trouble he was facing with school and his parents. But despite this, authorities had appeared to be acting under the impression that Ricky had disappeared as a result of foul play. Ricky's father, so Ricky Thomas Sr., actually died in the year of 2000 and was never listed as a suspect in the investigation, so it was ultimately believed that he had nothing to do with his son's missing status. Not long after Ricky's disappearance and the snow globe incident had occurred, Tina and John divorced. Ricky's case remains unsolved to this day, and it's likely listed as an open cold case simply because investigators appear to have very little leads to follow. Over the years, authorities received multiple tips that they followed up regarding his potential whereabouts and possible sightings of Ricky. In the year of 2015, authorities had conducted a search of the Ferdinand Newtown Lake off of Ferdinand Road East using a number of police divers. At this time, they'd shared little information regarding why they were doing so, but it was known that the search of the lake had potentially been relating to Ricky's disappearance, and they were operating off of a tip that they'd received. And in 2016, the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children released an age-progressed image of what Ricky may look like at that time, since he was then to be around 33 years of age. And that is everything that I have to discuss on Ricky Thomas Jr.'s disappearance. I'm sure you can kind of gather now why there's a lot of controversial opinions on this case, because a lot of people seem to really think that his stepfather may have had something more sinister to do with his disappearance, and that they should have been looking into him a lot more, but I don't know, there's a lot of contrasting opinions, so it'd be great to hear your guys' thoughts down below. I know there are a lot of theories floating about, in my opinion don't seem to have a lot of substantial evidence backing them, but it is still a potential theory that may have happened, so let me know your thoughts. But like I said, please do be mindful of other people's opinions. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another case. Thanks for watching. Bye.